Ray asked me to kind of help lead us through this meeting. Today is the Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the Board of Directors. The first item is to call this meeting to order.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a quorum?
Madam Chair, we do not have a quorum. However, we do have West Basin's chair of the Water Policy and Legislation Committee, you yourself, Director Gray, as well as our committee alternate, Director Scott Houston. As such, we are able to move forward as a committee and hear these items.
All right, thank you. Is the next item public comment?
It is, Madam Chair, and there are no members of the public in attendance today, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If any member of the public would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Madam Chair, I do not see any requests.
All right, thank you. Next item, please.
Madam Chair, the next item is item 5.1. It's our action calendar. It's for the West Basin's draft policy principles and 2025 legislative and regulatory priorities. For this presentation, we have Augustine Hahn, our Water Policy and Resources Development Analyst, and this item begins on packet page 3.
Thank you, EJ. Chairwoman Gray, Director Houston. The item before you is the draft policy principles and legislative and regulatory priorities update. As EJ mentioned, the staff report is on page 3 of the agenda packet. And there's also a redlined copy of edits on page 6. Go to the next slide, please. So just a quick summary. Staff is seeking updates to the policy principles and priorities document. There are no proposed changes to the overarching policy principles and only proposed updates to the annual priorities. Staff presents a draft to the committee for review and discussion. An updated draft will be brought forward at the next board meeting. We could go to the next slide. Just to provide a little bit of an overview or continue the summary, the district has a long-standing history of identifying and engaging on important policy issues. In 2024, the board adopted the first policy principles and priorities document. This document was intended to align policy advocacy efforts with the district's mission and core values as established by the board. And of course, in all of our policy work, it comes with extensive collaboration, and that is with NPA, BSA, Metropolitan Water District, the industry associations that the district is members to, and also other stakeholders on those policy matters. Moving on to the next slide. Just a high-level overview of the drafted edits. We've included, in consideration of future supplies, the inclusion of stormwater. Staff regularly engages in the watershed area steering committees within the Safe Clean Water program. Staff also engages in the water resilience and water use efficiency and communication task forces related to the LA County water plan efforts. The LA County water plan, if you remember, the board adopted in July of 2020. The next area is incentives for industrial on-site reuse. As you may know, industrial use is very prevalent within our service area, particularly within certain communities. This is related to the effort for a federal tax incentive for industrial on-site reuse. This was an item that we notified the committee and board of in our June 2024 federal update. And this has been a long-standing effort by water reuse to provide an incentive for industrial water users. As we mentioned, staff engages with our industry associations on this. Our assistant general manager actually had the opportunity to speak at the industrial reuse conference this past November. I believe this is an issue that's been talked about in meetings in DC with the district as well. And we continue to engage with water reuse on this effort. Next is water use efficiency. We've included a line to support compliance. This is to assist our retailers. If you recall, the water use efficiency framework is not directly relevant to the water district, but it does have impacts on our service area. And so West Basin is in discussions with our municipal retailers to see how we can find regional solutions for compliance. And so we've included that there. Moving on to the affordability piece, we've included protections for existing ratepayers and public trust. In January 24, the board adopted a support position on Senator Padilla's LIWAP proposal. And then on the state side, we've also seen efforts in Senator Durazo's SB 1255, which was introduced last February and ultimately did not pass. In December, the EPA also released a water affordability needs assessment report, which is included, which you will see an update on in the federal report later in this meeting. Lastly, the last area is greenhouse gas reductions. The intent on including this language is to realize any energy savings that can be achieved by any of our ongoing and future capital improvement projects or R&R projects. That summarizes the edits, but like I mentioned on page 6, we do have a red line version of all of those edits to the annual priorities. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the only thing I would add to this is, as we've always done here at West Basin, with not only our priorities, but our policy principles, is to just try to provide staff with guiding documents to bring information back to the board of directors with urgency, especially when there are issues that's very clearly been made to staff that they are priorities for the district. We've been leaders, I think, in the development of new water supplies in the state of California. I would be very proud to say that we've always been a leader in water use efficiency, promoting that and actually working with our communities to be held accountable and to actually achieve what I would say are significant savings in our water use demand. So I would argue, or I would point out that these documents should not and will not be held, as templates as far as what West Basin staff would be doing. We will continue to always come back to the committee and board of directors for direction. This just outlines kind of the areas in which we really want to focus our efforts.
All right. Well, thank you, EJ. And thank you, Augustine, for the report. Director Houston, do you have any questions?
Let's see, I just have a comment up front. I want to say thank you to staff. I do think these are great revisions. I see no problem here. If anything, you've made it better and stronger. So I support these. And I think you said, Augustine, what we just did this only last year. Was that the first time we did this type of a policy paper or document? I think you said something like that.
Yeah, from what I see, last year was the first time that the board.
Great. And then lastly, and I think this is probably for you and EJ, but my understanding when we created that was to basically have sort of a framework that you all could follow during the year, so you wouldn't have to come to the board for every issue. You had some leeway of what we supported. Obviously, if there's things that you deem more important and or controversial, you bring them to the board. But isn't that right, EJ, that this kind of gave you that roadway?
It does. It gives us very specific direction. It's important to note that through the legislative session, staff myself included, we're always engaged in some of these issues and helping to navigate kind of some of our stakeholder groups and our associations, kind of what West Basin feels on certain issues. It's important to note that with only a few exceptions, we would always come before the committee and board for official positions. The only time, and I think, in my 19 years at West Basin staff through the Office of the General Manager have taken positions on legislation without doing it, is when it's a very specific, urgent issue where it's a clear path given from the board of directors from past decisions. So a water bond, as things are coming together, a water reuse legislation. There have been times where legislators are looking for West Basin to step in and state their position at the very last minute. And we have done that through the Office of the General Manager. So it's not individual staff members, but it's always very clearly communicated to the board of directors via email and phone calls with the board president.
Yeah, very good. I think that's great. And it gives you all some flexibility too, because sometimes requests come in very last minute, and unless you have a special board meeting or something that we really need to look at, it does allow you to consider positions or sign on to certain letters, etc. To the best of your ability. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm good with this. It is an action item, so I.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you, Director Houston. Next item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. This next item is an information item. It's item 6.1. It's our fiscal year 2023-2024 annual water use report. And I'm very pleased to inform the committee and hopefully the other board members get a chance to listen in. As we always do annually, each of our West Basin interns, we try to provide an opportunity for them to come and present before a committee. And today we have Caitlin Beal, our Water Policy and Resources intern, for this presentation. It begins on packet page 12.
Good afternoon, directors. Today we'll be presenting the first information item on the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 annual water use report. Next slide, please. A little overview on the annual water use reports. The annual water use report illustrates the diverse water supply portfolio utilized to meet a diverse set of demands in West Basin service area. It shows annual and historic water demands for the service area as a whole and per individual customer agency. The report takes a holistic view by accounting for all water types within the regional water supply portfolio. And West Basin has been publishing this data since fiscal year 2004. Next slide, please. The data used in this report comes from three primary sources: the West Basin Recycled Water Production Report, Metropolitan's monthly imported water purchases invoices, and the Water Replenishment District's monthly groundwater production report. This data can be further utilized for other studies, evaluations, and/or projections. Next slide. Looking at the historical service area demand, we can see that the service area continues to reduce its overall demand. In fiscal year 2024, a total of 131,997 acre-feet of water was used. This is over a 31% decrease, nearly 60,000 acre-feet from fiscal year 2000, which was at 191,346 acre-feet. Next slide. Now examining the 10-year average total water use, West Basin is continuing to reduce reliance on imported water. In fiscal year 2024, West Basin service area reported 83,887 acre-feet of imported water, setting the record for the lowest imported demand for a second year in a row. An increased utilization of local groundwater is also noticeable. In fiscal year 2024, West Basin service area reported 32,420 acre-feet of groundwater production. This is the first time more than 30,000 acre-feet of groundwater has been used since fiscal year 2015. Next slide. Moving on to some notable changes for individual customer agencies, starting with California Water Service, Dominguez District. In recent years, California Water Service Dominguez District has been utilizing more local groundwater. In fiscal year 24, 7,570 acre-feet was produced, which is a 10-year high. Conversely, imported water was at a 10-year low at 17,906 acres. Next slide. Similar to Dominguez District, the Hawthorne District of California Water Service has also been utilizing more local groundwater. In fiscal year 24, 600 acre-feet was produced. This represents a rebound from the 10-year low recorded in fiscal year 22 of 80 acre-feet. This graph illustrates that the city of Manhattan Beach has been utilizing more recycled groundwater. In fiscal year 2024, 321 acre-feet of recycled water was used, which is a 10-year high. This is the first time more than 300 acre-feet of recycled water has been used since fiscal year 2015 at 313 acre-feet. Golden State Water Company Southwest District has also been utilizing more local groundwater. In fiscal year 24, 9,231 acre-feet of local groundwater was used, while use of imported water was at a 10-year low. This continues a long rebound in production from the 10-year low recorded in fiscal year 2016, which was 2,000 acre-feet. Next slide. Seawater barrier injection amounts are rebounding to pre-drought levels. In fiscal year 2024, a total of 16,093 acre-feet of water was injected. This is a rebound from fiscal year 2022 and 2023, which injected less than 14,000 acre-feet and coincided with an interruption at the Hyperion facility. Next slide. Aside from the data, this report also includes information about West Basin Municipal Water District, including its board of directors and divisions, service area and customer agency maps, information about the recycled water program, as well as a recycled water system map, water rates and charges, and other water resources planning efforts. Last slide. A hard copy of this report will be circulated to the board and customer agencies, and the document will be made available online. We wanted to give a special thank you to Michael and the PI team for their partnership in this effort. This concludes this information item, and happy to address any questions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this report, to give a lot of credit to it, has been, I think, instrumental as far as my understanding of our region, of our retailers, of the needs of our communities, and really a lot about what West Basin needs to meet our community's needs. And so this has been a continued tradition, I think, at West Basin that's been carried on by the Water Policy and Resources Department annually. Staff utilizes this document, but I've also been told by the West Basin Water Association and the membership and our customer agencies that they also utilize it. Again, it'll be, I think, a great help to us as we develop our urban water management plan coming up in this next fiscal year. And so this document, I think, is a great help to West Basin and our community. So I want to say thank you for everybody that worked on it.
Thank you, EJ, and thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions? Director Diaz?
Yeah,
None, you said? I can't hear you.
this is Director Houston.
Yes. Any
It's
questions,
okay.
Director Houston?
Yeah, just maybe
Hear
a
me?
quick question. Yeah, I hear you. A quick question or two. I just want to say thank you. It's a really good report. When will it be posted or put together, finalized?
So it's pretty, oh, go ahead, Matt.
It's been produced, so it was posted to our website, so it is publicly available
Oh, okay.
with our PI team to notify others about that. We also produce some limited amounts of printed copies that we'll share with our retailers and anybody else who requests them.
Okay, good. And then I don't know if you do it automatically, but I think you should please send it to the COG, that hopefully they could somehow distribute it to the COG members and the board members over there. I think that'd be a great idea if we don't do that normally. And one last thing, I mean, this data is really amazing because of the fact that we've had our, we're really upping groundwater use. I mean, our retailers in the area, a lot of this has been 10 years or 20 years, some of it, but, right? I mean, we're having this revamp. We're using more recycled in some areas. Yes, we're selling less potable. So it really tells a story of what we've done and are doing. And financially, it's hard on us in some ways. My question just would be, like, the big picture. I don't know who can say this, but in that one or two sentences, when someone says, uses this and say, hey, West Basin did X, or we are at this place, because this shows it all when they look in the weeds. But what's kind of the bottom line? Just one word, sentence or two that someone would.
2 sentences. I'll just try to say that West Basin, with the assistance of our retailers and communities, are walking the walk. If you look at the data that's presented, this might be a long second sentence. If you look at the data that's presented in the water use report, you can clearly see that water use efficiency has taken hold, and that West Basin and our retailers are unselfishly investing in local groundwater supplies in lieu of imported water.
I like that. So I think that however you all surmise this, I think that that's how, when it's discussed, we articulate it, because it just shows me, I think every city and retailer that's part of West Basin should be proud of this, quite frankly. And so that's why when you're getting it out there, and they can look on the website too, it just shows you, yeah, we are walking the walk. We're working and doing this. We're very proud of it. But it's hard to articulate that to people why it's so important. But that's a big part of what you all do professionally. But I just want to say thank you, and how we can amplify that in its own way. But that, I just am amazed at the data and what it's shown us. So thank you for that, and thank you, and great job on this presentation to the board.
And Director Houston, to your point, what I'll do is right now we're in the midst of focusing in on some of the local efforts in relation to the fires. But when this settles down a little bit, hopefully soon, we will present, this committee will prepare some talking points on the water use report. So we'll have that. We can distribute that to our staff as well.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Director Hughes. There were excellent comments, and thank you to the presenter. Great report, very thorough. Next item, Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. This next item is item 6.2. It's our regularly scheduled state and federal legislative update for the month of December. I just wanted to point out that West Basin's had the opportunity now to have both of our lobbyists, VSA and MPA, come and kind of wrap up the end of year events. So one thing that I have asked our manager of water policy and resource development to do is to tee up our discussion about our legislators of the year. Looking at, now that we have dates for our Sacramento, Washington, D.C., I've kind of asked him to kind of bring this forward. It's a little bit before we were ready, but staff is very much prepared to talk about some potential options, because if we're going to present those awards in Sacramento, Washington, D.C., we'll want to begin that process. So I've asked Matt to add that to his regular update. So I'll hand it off to Matt now.
All right. Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray and Director Houston. So as you know, and as EJ mentioned, each year, the West Basin Board of Directors recognizes the efforts and successes of our state and federal representatives through our Legislator of the Year award. A list of past awardees was provided as a handout to the directors today, and will also be uploaded to the meeting chat. And as you can see from that list, West Basin gave out 5 awards last year, 2 for our state representatives and 3 for the federal. That included State Senator Ana Caballero, State Senator Ben Allen, U.S. Representative Adam Schiff, U.S. Representative Grace Napolitano, and U.S. Senator Alex Padilla. With our upcoming trips to Sacramento and Washington, D.C., it is once again time for us to consider any representatives for this year's award. And as is usual practice, and again, as EJ mentioned, staff has put together some potential options for the directors to consider. I also want to note that staff did reach out to both our state and federal advocacy teams earlier for any input that they might have about possible representatives for this year's awards. So I guess before I get into my options, would the committee chair like me to cover those, or would you like to have a discussion with Director Houston about this issue?
I think you could have a discussion with Director Houston about them.
Okay. I can present some options then for the two of you to hear, and then we can kind of go from there. So again, just please note that these are only options for you to consider. Staff is not advocating for any specific representative, but just providing background information on a few candidates that could support choosing someone for this award. So on the state side, we have, first off is Governor Newsom for his leadership and for working with his administration on a number of different kind of front over the past year, and especially the past few months, really. He's really been a big proponent, continues to be a big advocate for the Delta Conveyance Plan, moving that forward. Sites Reservoir, these are two big, obviously water projects that not only West Basin, but the entire California water industry, metropolitan have an interest in. He's also put into place a number of beneficial executive actions that will allow cities, water agencies to utilize more groundwater recharge during wet years, remove some of the permitting limitations that allow projects like that to move forward more expeditiously. He's also did a statewide kind of tour in the last few months to support building more critical water infrastructure and creating workforce development, new jobs related to that. And then, of course, it's kind of being put into place as we speak, but putting together a big wildfire response package that definitely impacts parts of our service area. So those are some of the reasons that we might want to choose to give an award to Governor Newsom. The next one is on the state side. This is in the Assembly. This is Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas. As you know, he did make a visit to our Edward C. Little water recycling facility last year, where he met with the directors. He took a brief tour of the facility, really, went out of his way to meet with us to learn more about not only water issues at large, talk about the climate bond, but to learn more about West Basin and what we do here. He's shown, a lot of leadership in a number of different areas, but certainly water issues has been one of them where he's made an impact. So again, we think that he could be worthy of consideration for an award. And then the final one on the state side is somebody that you're very familiar with, Senator Ben Allen. We did recognize him last year when he was proposing legislation, SB 867, related to the climate bond. However, he moved that forward even more so this year. That became Prop 4, which you're very familiar with. This was a very important issue for him last year, which he made clear to us when we visited with him in Sacramento last year. Also, I just would note that, he and his office were very open and engaged with us leading up to the election this year, working on Prop 4. We explored a number of different opportunities to educate our communities about the proposed bond measure. He does have 2 years before he turns out of the California legislature, but I think with Prop 4, he leaves a really good legacy in terms of that. Obviously, there were, the water community at large had, differing opinions on the bond. Could it have been more? But really, I think he did the best that he could do with the funding that they had available to work with on that bond. And so, again, we think that Senator Allen would be a worthy recipient this year. And then moving to the federal side, I have just 2 recommendations. It is both of our now sitting senators. To start with Senator Alex Padilla. Again, he's been a great leader on water issues in the Senate over the past couple of years. He's really picked up, it took over for, with the vacancy that Dianne Feinstein left. And so he's sponsored or co-sponsored just a number of different water-related legislation. He's a huge proponent and champion for the low-income water assistance programs that's important to our directors. He's hosted various workshops and hearings on water-related topics in the Senate committees. And again, I think in recent days, we're seeing just his continued support and leadership on wildfire policies and initiatives as well that are important to our service area. And then the last one is Senator Adam Schiff, again, for his continued leadership on both water and wildfire issues that impact our region and service area. West Basin staff has a good working relationship with his staff on water issues. They did pay us a visit within the last year or two to the ECL facility. And now that he's in his role as the state's junior senator, we anticipate that he will continue to work with Senator Padilla and the water industry at large throughout California to continue to develop policies and legislation that benefit our communities. So we think that both of our senators are good options for the award this year. And with that, staff has presented 5 potential nominees for this committee to consider, 3 on the state side and 2 on the federal side. So now I'd like to turn it back over to Chairwoman Gray and Director Houston for further discussion, and any additional feedback or recommendations that we received from you today will be reflected in the memo that will go to the full board at the January 27th board meeting.
All right, thank you, Matt. I certainly want Director Houston to give his input, but I think those are excellent recommendations on the state side, and certainly Senator Padilla on the federal side. I didn't hear what the second one was on the federal side.
That would be Senator Adam Schiff.
Oh, yes, I think those are all excellent recommendations. Director Houston, could you please give your input?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Number one, I would wholly agree. I think they're really great choices. I will say, quite frankly, if we could get an audience with the governor, that would be awesome. But that being said, I think he has been doing a lot in the water space over his years of service. And right now, of course, it's going to be even more critical than ever. Anybody in leadership in our state is very important at this moment. So I fully approve of those. I would like to consider adding one name on the state side, and that's Assemblymember Rick Zabur. And the reason I say that, and of course, he's on our northern end, so, you know, West Hollywood and up toward Malibu, Topanga area. Or maybe, well, he doesn't have that part, not Malibu, Topanga, that's Jackie Irwin. But he does have Santa Monica and going across the west side, but West Hollywood. But he was also really a big part of the climate bond, working with Senator Allen. And of course, so that had wildfire and water and wind in it. And, you know, I know that he's also a champion environment and very focused on water. And, you know, he, in his short tenure, has done a lot in the assembly and in leadership. So I would like to add Rick Zabur to the list of honor, if that would be acceptable. And then the other thought I had is more of a question, because the 2 United States senators from California, I fully agree. I'm just wondering, do we have anybody in our congressional delegation that we should consider this year at all? I mean, we've had folks who've helped us, maybe not to the level sometimes, but can staff give us any recommendation there of any of our Congress members? I mean, I am thinking a little bit about Maxine Waters up front, you know, because I believe, did she help champion some more funding for us this last cycle, or is there something that she's done? But that would be my input, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. You mentioned the governor. Was there some discussion about giving the governor an award also? Was that discussed, Matt, in your presentation?
Yeah, that was the first one, Director Gray, was
Okay.
Governor Newsom, and Governor Newsom, Speaker Rivas, and Senator Ben Allen.
And thank you, Director Houston, for that input because it did kind of make me think about others. I think you're right. We should look at our congressional delegation. Certainly, Maxine has been a champion on so many issues, and water being one. But I think we should look, have staff to kind of look and see if somebody else stands out besides Maxine. And if we end up doing more than one, that's fine, I think. On the Senate side, I know Bradford is terming out, Senator Bradford. So if staff could review and give us a thought about whether he's kind of been supportive of our issues. I think of water, and I think he has. So that's another one I want to throw out there because he is terming out, and he is part of our service area, I believe. We do have a new senator, and I'm not saying that she should be considered for an award, but I'd like to make sure that we build a relationship with Laurie Richardson. She's not new to the state assembly or the Senate, but I think we do need to kind of make sure she's on our list when we go to visit folks in Sacramento, that we build a relationship, and if we can do something now in the early part of her term.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray, for those comments. We'll certainly work with our Sacramento team to start building that relationship with Senator Richardson. And I know one thing that we've been talking about is potentially setting up some district meetings with our board members to go and meet with them. So I think after this kind of the environment that we're in right now, maybe after that kind of settles down a little bit, we'll plan to do that. We will have the meetings in Sacramento in about a month and a half, but it'd be nice to get her and her staff over to ECL if we can this year. Would be a goal of ours. And we'll definitely check into Senator Bradford as an option, and definitely Assemblymember Rick Spur. Good suggestion by Director Houston. To respond to your question about our congressional representatives, our general manager did bring up a good point that Senator Schiff was last year. This is a 2024 award. He was a sitting congressional representative at that time, and I did do an initial kind of research went through everybody's kind of legislation that they sponsored and co-sponsored. So we can kind of go back through that again and see if there's anybody else that we might want to add to the list before the board meeting. And we'll be sure to share that out with the directors ahead of that meeting. If there's any, because a lot of them are co-sponsors on could be some type of water bill or drought bill. I think there was a couple of them that did do that. So those are the types of things that we can be looking at to bring to your attention. So we'll bring that to the directors.
All right, so you do have all the input from the names we've given, and so if we could bring that back with that input. The other thing is that I think we do have a practice of sending out congratulatory letters to all our elected officials in our service area. So I hope that that's being done. So I just want to remind staff that I think that I support the fact that we should continue to do that. Director Houston, do you have any comments about that? Or any issues?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that staff normally, I hope at least, sends out something to maybe some of those higher up elected officials automatically that are now in place, EJ.
I think traditionally we have done multiple letters because individual directors have asked for individual items to be sent. So,
well, maybe staff could make sure they reach out to the directors, because if we want to send an individual letter to those electeds or to our divisions or what have you, versus if there's one that comes from the district as a whole, I don't know on that. But it's a good point, Director Gray, as to how we make sure that they get something from us that acknowledges, that they are now in their place. the other thing, before we leave this conversation, so I just wanted your thoughts still, Director Gray. Are you okay with adding Assemblymember Rick Zabur to this list?
Yes, based on what you said, and if, staff certainly, not the fact they have to make sure that's the information, but yes, I'm okay with that. I think we should
Great.
bring the list that got input from both of us to the board and see how they
Perfect.
feel.
And then, and I do,
Oh, I'm sorry, Scott. I just wanted
Go
to make
ahead.
sure, in those letters to the elected officials, is there any way that we could indicate that their representative is who their representative would be in their area? Is that something that could be included in that email so that they know, or is that, is in that letter rather, is that something that we already do?
Let us put together some drafts and we'll get them out to the board of directors.
Okay. I'm
And then,
sorry, Director,
Madam
you should go on.
oh, that's okay. I just had one thought because I wholly agree with what you said about the congressional people. And so I just know that, and I know it's maybe been over a year that certainly Maxine Waters definitely championed some things for us. And so I just would like the staff to also think, yes, if it's not Waters, but who else? And even, and a little bit of this is you don't always have to be like, well, they were the lead on something, but maybe they were really advocating for something, or they were more, more of a mouthpiece about some things. Let's say, for example, like, I'm just throwing it out there, not knowing, but Sydney Kamlager-Dove, she's now on Natural Resources, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the Congress, I think. But for example, like, has she maybe been championing, water issues, whether it's, domestic or international, for example? I mean, because we do have all of our congressional folks have been pretty stable and steady, and I do like to, look at different folks for the award, of course. But when you're coming back to us, can you kind of look at, maybe a little bigger picture that someone has maybe done something this past year, if it wasn't specific to West Basin, but maybe broader, just as an idea for consideration? Okay. I do think it'd be nice to honor one of our Congress members because, there's two houses, right? So I just think that seems balanced. So that would be my recommendation. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I would not exclude Maxine unless there's a reason why we should. Okay, thank you.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you both. I feel we have our direction, and we'll bring back some more information for you ahead of the board meeting in a couple weeks.
right,
I'll
thank
continue
you,
now
Matt.
with, I'm sorry. I'll continue now with my state and federal legislative update, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that begins on page 15 of the agenda packet. And both reports this month were provided as handouts to the directors and will be uploaded to the meeting chat for public access. So the legislature returned from its recess on January 6th and is now in the process of introducing new legislation and working on other issues. The legislature has another month or so to introduce bills, with representatives in both the Senate and the Assembly being limited now to a lower allowed bill count of 35 bills each this year. If you do the math, that's still up to 4,200 bills that can be introduced, but we'll see if this change in policy impacts the overall number. The special session that was initiated in December to prepare for the incoming Trump presidency has mostly been wrapped up. And as we all know from the events of the last week, most of the legislature's attention continues to be on the LA County wildfires. To that, Governor Newsom has proposed $2.5 billion in wildfire response for the LA County fires, with $1 billion being used for emergency response, cleanup, and recovery efforts. This funding is proposed to come from the state's rainy day budget reserves. Additional details about that funding package is included in the monthly Emil Pappas and Associates report, and a vote on the package could occur later this week on Friday. Other priorities from the governor's office related to the LA County wildfires include assisting displaced students, expedited debris removal and mitigating flood and mudslide risk in those impacted communities, extending tax filing and payment deadlines for LA County residents, and suspending permitting and review requirements under CEQA and the California Coastal Act to allow for quicker rebuilding of homes and businesses. I will now briefly touch on the state budget. And due to the fires, Governor Newsom didn't provide his usual January budget briefing, but he did offer a brief overview of the budget during a press conference earlier this month. And as opposed to the last couple of years, which started off with less optimistic outlooks, we'll call it, projected deficits, this year's financial outlook is showing a current surplus in the state budget, due in part to a $17 billion increase in state revenue. However, tempering this good news is the fact this surplus is mostly dedicated to go toward addressing future budget gaps. The state's independent analyst, the LAO, is currently forecasting a $20 billion deficit by 2026-2027, and that is currently projected to grow to up to $30 billion by 28-29. Of course, a lot can and likely will happen between now and then. Governor Newsom was not overly concerned about these potential future deficits, and he said that there could be ballot initiatives proposed in the future that would increase current reserve fund deposits and that would exclude reserve deposits from county toward the overall reserve caps. The governor's budget also proposes $2.7 billion for the first year of a multi-year plan to allocate the Prop 4 funding, the climate bond funding. This plan will help to expedite projects and programs that improve water and wildfire resilience throughout the state. Some of the funding, water-specific funding provisions include $153 million for water reuse and recycling, $173 million for flood management, and $232 million for dam safety and climate resilience. In addition to the Prop 4 funds, $174 million in additional funds are proposed to increase water storage, replenish groundwater, and improve natural bodies of water, such as our rivers and streams throughout the state. To support some of this funding, the budget proposes shifting $273 million from prior year general fund obligations to the Prop 4 investments. These shifts include $51 million in water recycling. This is an issue that staff's been very engaged with, especially with our partners at Water Reuse, and it's something that we'll continue to track with our state advocacy team and Water Reuse and others. In the Assembly, Speaker Rivas announced 5 new committee chairs, with the other 30 committees retaining their existing representatives. On water issues, the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee will now be chaired by Assemblymember Damon Connolly from Marin County, while the Water Parks, Wildlife, and Natural Resources committees will continue to be chaired by Diane Pappins from San Mateo and Isaac Bryan from Culver City and Los Angeles, respectively. And while the current Senate Pro Tem, Mike McGuire from Santa Rosa, still has 2 years left before he terms out of the legislature, there's already discussion about who could replace him. And currently the names being mentioned most frequently include Lena Gonzalez from Long Beach, Steve Padilla from the very southern part of California, Nick Limon from Santa Barbara, and Angelique Ashby from Sacramento County. Staff will work with the admin team. I think we have all the info in place to send out a full list of all the committees and leadership positions for both the Assembly and the Senate for the current. Last month, I kind of mentioned this a little bit. Governor Newsom also toured around the state, highlighting some of the work that's being done to prop up jobs, overall economic development, and water infrastructure. On the water side, he focused on groundwater recharge. He promoted major state water projects in both the Delta Conveyance Project and the Sites Reservoir. And he talked about investments in water infrastructure that support both urban and ag areas, utilizing technology to better manage the state's water resources. And then I believe I mentioned this at last week's Metropolitan Caucus meeting during the water supply update, but DWR did conduct its first snow survey earlier this month, which showed snowpack conditions of about 91% of normal, which isn't too bad. However, January, I think as we know, especially down here in Southern California, has been very dry, and the statewide snowpack currently stands at about 84% of normal, with the picture being even worse in Central and Southern California, those mountain areas. As a result of the snowpack and other key water supply indicators, Department of Water Resources did increase the state water project allocation from 5 to 15%. That could continue to increase in the coming months through April or May, but it will largely depend on whether any additional atmospheric rivers or major snowpack events occur this winter and into the spring. And finally, there was a separate handout on the bill report. I'll say that this month's bill report is very short at only one bill for water bills, but you can definitely expect the list of bills to grow quickly in the coming weeks. And staff will also be in Sacramento later this week at both aqua and water reuse meetings, which should give us some additional insight and perspective on some of those proposed legislative measures and regulatory updates. And we'll be sure to bring any of those to this committee. And that concludes this month's state legislative report. Are there any questions before I move over to the federal update?
All right, thank you, Art. Director Houston, any questions?
I think the only question I have is when we think about our trip to Sacramento, but I see that's not till, it looks like early March, right? So we've got another month. Okay. Because obviously staff, I don't know if you talk to us offline a little bit on some of the thoughts and priorities and or what you present in the meeting, but I'm certainly sure you're already thinking about some of our issues, concerns, and talking points when we go to Sacramento. And I think one of those, of course, should be, the Prop 4 funding. I mean, how that might affect or help West Basin in any way, shape, or form. So when we're talking to those lawmakers and those leaders, and I'll just put it out there now too, we should also, if it makes sense, can we talk to the State Water Resources Control Board this trip if we have something to discuss with them, so if you guys would think about that. But I'm very interested in, figuring out between the budget constraints, but also this new potential money that we have access to. Is there anything that we can potentially secure for our district, or some of our agencies, or even our retailers that would help them? So can you all think about that? And we can work together on some issues. So when we go to talk to Sacramento folks, we have some concrete things to discuss. I'd really like that. And with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, Matt, you want to continue? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray. I will do so. As I mentioned earlier, the federal report is also being provided today as a handout and being uploaded to the meeting chat. So the 119th Congress kicked off on January 3rd, with Republicans now controlling both the House and the Senate, albeit with a very small margin in the House currently. Congress will be working on several different priorities early this session, including a budget reconciliation package, fiscal year 25 appropriations bills that still need to be wrapped up, and a disaster relief bill for the California wildfires. I'm not going to get into the politics that are currently taking place regarding congressional aid to California for the fires, but suffice it to say there's a lot of back and forth going on between both parties right now, and additional information on this topic is provided in the VSA report. In the report, you'll also see an updated list of committee assignments for West Basin's delegation for both the Senate and the House. To quickly summarize, Senator Padilla was reassigned to all of the committees that he served on in the previous session, while Senator Schiff will serve on the committees on agriculture, environment and public works, judiciary, and small business. I won't go through each of our House delegation assignments, but most of them will serve on one or two committees each. And again, you can see a list of those in the report. Also, while not part of our delegation, Representative Jared Huffman from California will assume the role of ranking member of the House Committee on Natural Resources in this next Congress. Representative Huffman has been very closely involved in water and environmental issues in California for a very long time. And that committee, the Natural Resources Committee, oversees issues for the Department of Interior, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, others as well that are very important to water industry at large. Another representative from Northern California, Representative Doug LaMalfa, was elected to serve as the chair of the Congressional Western Caucus, which has more than 100 members on the caucus, and which oversees key issues impacting the Western United States, including water supply, wildfire, and other environmental factors. With the new administration rounding into shape, there's some upcoming nomination hearings of interest with Lee Zeldin, who's a former member of Congress, being considered as the administrator of the EPA, and Doug Burgum, the former governor of North Dakota, being considered as the Secretary of the Interior. Those are obviously the federal agencies with major impacts on water. There's some other recent announcements about other agency deputy secretaries that's included in the report that you can look through as well. And then another issue that staff tracks very closely as a priority issue for the board of directors is water affordability. Last month, the EPA released a water affordability needs assessment, which provides information on several different areas related to affordability in the United States. A link to the full report can be found on page 5 of the VSA report. In addition, there is an EPA water affordability listening session that was rescheduled to tomorrow, and I believe that staff is planning to tune into that listening session, and we'll be sure to report back to this committee on any additional items of interest that may come from either the report itself or the listening session. The Bureau of Reclamation has also recently announced more than $200 million for Title 16 water recycling and desalination projects, with many of the funds going to California water agencies. This is a funding source that West Basin utilized in the past when it was constructing the Edward C. Little facility. You can also see a partial list of those funded projects in the report. And in one of the many final acts before he leaves office, President Biden signed the 2024 Water Resource Development Act, or WRDA, into law. Included in the conference agreement of the law is language to authorize the Army Corps to utilize its supply-related authorities to give full consideration of water supply projects, water conservation, and drought resiliency in its water resources projects. While this language does fall a little short of making water supply a primary mission of the Army Corps, which had been the goal of legislation by Representative Grace Napolitano last year, it does make some progress that can be built upon in the future. And WRDA is another vehicle that West Basin has utilized to secure a funding authorization to its recycled water system expansion over the years. This month's VSA report also includes several updates on various water quality issues, including PFAS and the lead and copper rule. These updates can be found on pages 6 and 7 of the report. Water policy staff will continue to work and coordinate with our operations department to ensure that we're tracking and engaging on the most significant water quality issues with impact to our service area. Finally, as with the state advocacy trip, staff wants to thank the directors for providing feedback regarding the spring 2025 Washington, D.C. lobbying trip. Staff has let the VSA team know of the director's availability, and so we will now begin planning for a trip the week of April 28th. VSA will begin putting together the list of visits with our delegation, along with any other elected officials, other administration or agencies that we might want to meet with, and any other partners who we usually meet with when we go out there. If there's any specific meetings that you would like us to request or schedule, please reach out to myself or EJ. Staff will continue to provide updates about the Washington, D.C. trip via the board secretary and also through updates given at the upcoming February and March Water Policy and Legislative Committee. And that concludes my monthly federal update. However, additional information is available in the VSA report. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions on our federal update.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Director Houston's question.
Yes, I just have one question, and you mentioned it. So Congressman Huffman, and I see, so he's now ranking member of the House Committee on Natural Resources, which is also the committee that Sidney Comliger Dove sits on, correct? Right, same committee?
Yeah, I'll have to verify that, but yes, that's the one.
I'm reading it right, because she's on House Natural Resources, which I think is the same here, but, you know, I do think that regardless of that, I think, Huffman's been a champion of water, as you mentioned, and I think that we should try to get a meeting with him while we're in DC. To hear his perspective on some things, as well as talk about what we're doing. And since he's certainly influential and came from water before he was in Congress. So I'd like to just kind of throw that out there when we're looking at some of the folks who are outside our jurisdiction to meet with. If you all would, if they could put in a request to his office while we're there. And certainly I think because Sidney Comliger Doug is on that committee as well. And she is one of our representatives. I think some of these conversations would be really interesting that we could have when we're in Washington. So I'd like you all to look at that and just add that to your roster for VSA, please.
You definitely do that, Director Houston, and to do that, this was actually one of the kind of backup or alternative options that we could include for Legislator of the Year award. Representative Huffman was the sponsor last year of HR 8682, which was the Water Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act, which would have helped, you know, mitigate some of the tax impact that people get when they apply for a turf rebate or something like that on the federal income tax. So he could be an option for us to give an award to as
Did that pass though, or not?
did not pass.
You did champion it.
He was the sponsor of that bill.
Probably some of our people supported it in our delegation, right? Well, I think that would be great if you would probably add him to the list for our discussion. Okay, and that's it. Hey, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you. Is there anything else?
That's all I have, Chairwoman Gray. Thank you.
Thank you for that great report. The next item, EJ, please.
Madam Chair, the next item is our final information item today. It's item 6.3. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District update. And for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley-High, our Senior Water Policy and Resources Analyst.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, Chair Gray and Director Houston. So this report summarizes a few updates on programs at Metropolitan. And these items include the federal grant funding award, the 2025 legislative priorities and principles, and the zero emission vehicle transition program. So in addition, there are PowerPoint slides that begin on page 32 in the packet. So thank you for bringing those up. So the first item is the federal funding award for the from the Lower Colorado River Conservation Program. So Metropolitan received notification of grant funding from the Bureau of Reclamation, which the board now has authorized entering into these agreements. These activities will be in place through September 2031. And Reclamation's Lower Colorado Conservation Program is part of the Inflation Reduction Act funding, which is intended to increase water conservation and efficiency opportunities that can address the drought situation in the Lower Colorado River Basin. And these two projects identified here are intended to reduce long-term demand for Colorado River water by improving the ability to manage the Colorado River system operations after 2026. So first, Metropolitan will receive funding to support their Antelope Valley East Kern High Desert Water Bank Conservation Project. Reclamation will pay Metropolitan up to $82 million for the design and construction of this facility. So this project will create a total of 168,000 acre feet of system conservation water within 10 years. And the system conservation water may be left in Lake Mead prior to the completion of the project milestones. The water would be conserved through Metropolitan's existing extraordinary conservation intentionally created surplus. And this would, to achieve their pre-delivery prior to 2027. So in addition, Metropolitan will receive funding to offer turf removal. And this would be for commercial, institutional, and industrial properties throughout the service area. And Reclamation will pay Metropolitan up to $95.8 million for the replacement of up to 30 million square feet of turf. So this will allow Metropolitan to increase the turf rebate to $4 per square foot of replaced turf. Of the $4 per square foot, Metropolitan would contribute $1 per square foot and Reclamation would contribute $3 per square foot. So through this program, Metropolitan would create a total of 97,296 acre feet of Colorado River System conservation water within 10 years. And the system conservation water may be left in Lake Mead prior to the completion of the project milestones. The water would be conserved through, again, their existing conservation ICS surplus accounts in order to achieve the pre-delivery prior to 2027. So these two projects are part of the second half of the Lower Colorado Conservation Bucket 2 funding program for the projects that offer long-term efficiencies and result in multi-year water savings. So I can move on to the next item on the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Metropolitan Board adopted their 2025 legislative priorities and principles. And this document represents developments and new laws on the state and federal arenas and is consistent with Metropolitan initiatives that include the General Manager's Business Plan, Metropolitan's Climate Action Plan, and the planning efforts on the Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water, also referred to as CAMP for Water. The contents of the priorities and principles are more streamlined this year to reduce repetitive phrases. For example, the language seeking funding is included once in each section, as opposed to repeating itself in the following bullet points. And the priorities also include new Metropolitan-sponsored proposals. So this is a collaborative approach on current and anticipated legislative water policy issues to effectively manage Southern California's watershed, resources, and infrastructure to ensure long-term water resilience and reliability for communities and ecosystems. Metropolitan, as you know, will be advocating for these priorities and principles at both the state and federal levels. If we can go to the next slide, please. So with respect to the zero emission vehicle transition program, the Metropolitan Board approved additional funding not to exceed $35 million over the next 2 fiscal years through June 2026. And this to support, excuse me, a zero emission vehicle transition program. So Metropolitan's fleet consists of over 1,000 vehicles. More than half of their fleet is aging, and there's a need to ensure critical vehicles are maintained and able to respond as needed. There's also a new zero emission policy. The California Air Resources Board adopted new rules and regulations which set milestones for replacing medium and heavy duty vehicles with zero emission vehicles. These regulations require Metropolitan to phase out their existing vehicles to the cleaner burning engine vehicles. And as you are aware, Metropolitan has a limited budget. With this action, a portion of these expenses can be covered by debt service. So this slide that we're looking at on the left side, it summarizes the planned purchases for the critical vehicles that are currently in poor condition. As you can see, there is a wide range of pricing among these types of vehicles. And then the second slide on the right, it summarizes the allocation of funding for this particular option. The approved budget for the vehicle purchases is $13.8 million, and the cost for replacement are $44 million. So this additional funding that is needed is $35 million to purchase vehicles. It's important to know that ordinarily Metropolitan would not usually debt finance operating costs. However, the vehicle expenditure is technically considered a capital expenditure. Therefore, it's eligible for financing of this nature. The use of the additional funding in the near term to supplement the approved operating equipment budget for critical vehicle purchases can provide financial flexibility to address their vehicle needs, comply with regulatory requirements, and minimize the operational risk. So prior to the next budget cycle, Metropolitan staff will return to the board to present options on long-term funding solutions for the purchasing of additional zero-emission vehicles. And that wraps up the update for those items. If we can move to the next slide, please. We'll have a look at the water supply condition. So this is a chart that Metropolitan put together on a routine basis and keeps it updated. So I'll just go through these briefly. On the state water project supply, the top row, the shaded in green, there is above normal Northern Sierra snowpack. It's currently at 162% of normal. Above normal precipitation is measured at the Northern Sierra 8 Station Index, and it's 141% of normal. Lake Oroville's current storage is at 58% capacity. The San Luis Reservoir currently has 88% of its capacity for the state water contracting agencies. And on the next row, for the Upper Colorado River Basin, the snowpack is 92% of normal. There is normal or near normal precipitation, which is at 94%. Lake Powers Reservoir is at 36% of its total capacity. Lake Mead is at 33% of its total capacity. And then the bottom row shows the graphics for Metropolitan's local storage reservoirs. And then lastly, the graph on the bottom right corner shows a prediction for operating conditions at Lake Mead. So for calendar year 2025, a level 1 shortage will govern the operation of Lake Mead. However, there are no impacts to Metropolitan at this level 1 shortage condition. And also there is no expectation of Metropolitan making any drought contingency plan contributions in 2025. So that concludes my report. Also included in the packet are additional information regarding the December board meeting, their actions, and the votes that were taken, and then also a list of the draft agenda item for January. Thank you for the opportunity to give you this report.
Thank you, Tammy, for that excellent report. Thank you. Director Houston, any comments?
Sure, just one question, Madam Chair, and I just want to understand, Tammy, you mentioned that potential higher rebate for the turf removal. Can you just, so that's up to $4 a square foot or something? Can you explain that real briefly one more time?
Yeah, correct. So Metropolitan will be able to increase the turf rebate to $4 per square foot. This is for the CII, the commercial, industrial, and institutional facility. So that's how that rebate, Metropolitan would contribute $1 per square foot, and then Reclamation would contribute the remainder of the $3.
For the CII.
CII,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, so in our area, that means, because we add the extra buck to that too, right? The CII. So those who qualify could get up to 5 in our area.
Yeah, that's correct.
When does that go into effect?
You know, I don't know right now. Yeah, but we are certainly.
It's coming down the pike, I guess, right? Okay, wow, that's great. Okay, excellent. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. The next item, please.
Madam Chair, that concludes our information calendar, which brings us to item 7, closed session, which there are no closed session items, which is followed up by directors' comments and future agenda items. Item 8.
Director Houston, do you have any comments, please?
Just I want to say thank you to staff, a very good meeting. I really appreciate everything that was brought forward in the discussion, as well as with my colleague, Director Gray. So we're looking forward to getting this year off. I know it's been really difficult at this time, and parts of our service area have been impacted. So I do want to say thanks to everyone who's working on those issues, and staff as well. Staff's done a really good job to keep us informed of what's happening up in Malibu and Topanga, as well as the other areas affected by the fires. And I know we'll be doing more on all those issues, and anybody who lost the house or property, a friend, a loved one, etc. I mean, definitely our sympathies. These are really, really tough times and testing everyone. But if it has impacted any of our West Basin friends and family, I certainly want to extend my regards. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Houston. First, let me thank staff for those excellent reports today. We have great staff, and we do appreciate what you do. And thank you, Mr. General Manager. I would like to ask whether or not the General Manager or the President or whatever has thought about sending something out on behalf of the board to our service area, some way, just kind of iterating what Director Houston talked about, because we're all very much aware of the fire and what has happened and so forth. And I think we need to maybe consider something publicly in terms of support for our first responders and the bravery that they have exhibited during this time and what they're still faced with. And our police, our firefighters, our police officers, our leaders, in the county government and the city and the police and the sheriff and everyone involved. I mean, it's a real collaboration to address, what is happening with the fires. And certainly, I would assume that folks in our service area have been affected, even if it's not directly, but a family member. In fact, mine, one of my family members' house was burned down, and others had to evacuate from Hollywood Hills. So, I think everyone has been touched, but maybe you can have a discussion with EJ. Maybe you can have a discussion with Director Alvarez and Director Houston if you want to add to that and see what you think about that, if that's a good thought. So I'd like to hear from you on that too, Director Houston.
Oh, sure. Yes, I agree. And I know that the district did put out some information and a statement from our president, and included me as well, since I represent Division 4. But anything additional you'd like to look at, Director Gray, I do support that.
Director Gray, I'm happy to work with you on that. I do want to give our team, our public information education team, a lot of credit. They've been working round the clock through the weekends, not just helping and sharing information, but also reaching out to our communities to gather information so that we're assured that everything that we put out is accurate and timely. But I'm happy to work with you if you want to craft a message as well. We can get that up there. We do have our West Basin, www.westbasin.org does have a statement from the district on this issue that does share information about water quality in regard to all of our retailers. And then we're continuing every single day to produce new and updated content on all social media platforms.
Yeah, and that's great. And I know that you've been sending the board updates, and we can talk about it off record, but I really think it's good to acknowledge those who are involved and trying to come to some, not resolution, but to help those that need help down, our leaders and certainly our staff. So, but we can talk about it later, but that's kind of the idea, EJ.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you to discuss.
Okay, thank you. And with that, again, thank you to the staff today for your reports, and thank you to the entire staff, everyone that's involved in making sure that we continue to meet our mission, and even in light of things that are unseen. So thank you, EJ, and thank you to staff, and thank you, Director Houston, for coming and joining the meeting today. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Great job.